Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast, episode number 122 of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have one update for you for a title, and 3 new LitRPG reviews just for you folks at home. And the first update will be on this particular title, Stormbane, talk about why discussing it. Also in new releases and reviews, we have Glitch Book 1 in the Glitch series. We have Gunslinger's Code, the first exploit, a RPG romp through a wild, weird west that never was. That's the actual title. And then End of an Era, Project Chrysalis, book number 2. And that's kind of it. There are a few other releases this week we'll talk about. I just didn't get a chance to get to, but also that don't appear. But not a huge release week for us this week. Before we begin, we'll get into, of course, LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, our first story is going to be about Harmon Cooper, and he's his merch. He's been nice enough to put up some merchandise, cups, t-shirts that relate to his particular intellectual property. There's some really cool stuff here. You can find them at harmoncooper.bigcartel.com. We'll link in the show notes, of course. But some of these are really kind of interesting. I like in particular this t-shirt, the feedback loop. It definitely fits in with the theme of the novel, and also, but this one is my favorite, the Mither Figures t-shirt. So it's a little more metal, and it's kind of just a fun slogan. But there's all kinds of other things here for people who enjoy that author's work. So go check it out if you're looking for some merch for some RPG stuff. Okay, in other LitRPG news, Aleron Kong released some artwork that he had commissioned for this character, Cyan. In this particular version of Cyan, the character, like, there's a ton of detail in here in this work. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, you can see what I'm talking about. Just the audio, go watch the video, because it's definitely worth checking out. Well, we'll link in the show notes, of course, for the link to the Facebook page where Aleron originally released this. But it's definitely good. It's detailed. You see, even for comparison wise, there's a crow or a raven behind Cyan, and he's a smaller character, so it gives a good sense of perspective in that in scale in that instance. But also just like the detail on the armor and then the bows and like the facial structures in the background looks really cool. So great stuff there. In other Aleron and Chaos Seed related news, book 7 of the Chaos Seed series, Predators, is out as an audiobook. So go check that out if you've been waiting for that. It's performed by Nick Podell, who does an absolutely wonderful job. I know people have for weeks and weeks have been clamoring to get their hands on the audiobook version of that novel. It is huge. It's a 47-hour audiobook, like slightly under. And it's one of the longest Audible books on their listings. It's not like a compilation of like multiple books in a series. So it is out. There are some reports that there were some issues with downloading it. So hopefully that'll be sorted out relatively soon. But again, that part of that issue is that it's a big novel. So Audible is working really hard to get that taken care of. Now, Aleron Kong, the author, is to celebrate this release. He's actually going to be doing a 7-day giveaway where he's giving out stuff that he has made, whether it's going to be Audible codes, calendars, maps, physical books, mouse pads, whatever else he decides to kind of throw out there. So go check out the LitRPG Facebook group page for details on that. We'll link in the show notes, of course, to also the live Facebook live stream that the author did announcing this and kind of just like talking to readers and audiobook listeners about it finally being out. So there you go. Okay, also in other LitRPG news, author Vasily Mihenko has released another piece of art. This one is a colorized version of his main character, Mahan, for the Way of the Shaman series. Again, loads of great detail here on stylization and just like some stuff that I never really would have like envisioned for the character. Also didn't realize he was blonde. I've always envisioned him as brunette for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me imposing myself into the character, I guess. But very interesting details on the character. So fun stuff there. Okay, last bit of LitRPG news. in the last couple of weeks, I myself talked about issues with Amazon. Amazon's had a very broad approach to responding to an issue that is legitimate for them. Black market paid for page reads. If you're part of the Kindle Unlimited program, that's a system where Amazon essentially allows you to have unlimited reads for like a small subscription service for all the books that are in that particular program. On the author side, the way that authors get paid is by every page that a reader reads, an author essentially gets paid out of a big gigantic pool of money, right? And so some authors have apparently been scamming the system, paying people in the black market to just do page reads or buy purchase books, and getting kind of scamming the system. And Amazon's approach to that has been to essentially on an automated system, send out letters and responses for anything they consider suspicious according to their particular algorithms. Like, this is legitimately not people like reviewing every single thing, because there's just too many for them to handle. So algorithms look at these patterns, and anything they see that's suspicious, they send out letters of warning, or even just like suspended accounts, or temporarily permanently ban them, or taken away the suspicious Kindle Unlimited reads, whether or not there's any like real proof that they're illegitimate or not. And so they have not just taken away money from authors who pay their bills, but also have actually taken away their full accounts, which means that their stuff is not available. And this is not just something in the past, this is happening now. The latest slew of these letters has gone out, and there are several LitRPG authors who have had their entire accounts closed on Amazon, which means that you can't see or read or purchase any of their titles. Whether this is temporary or permanent has yet to be seen, but there are legitimately some LitRPG authors happening right now, this instant when this is recorded, who are absolutely freaking out that their livelihood has been taken away from them. And again, part of that is that Kindle Unlimited requires exclusivity, which means you can't put your stuff other places, which means their stuff isn't anywhere else as a backup. And so there's a lot of other issues here, obviously. As a result of this, however, myself and some other LitRPG authors have decided essentially to take their titles out of the Kindle Unlimited program rather than face the shadow of like a banhammer, which all of us feel is inappropriate, because none of us have done anything wrong as far as we're all aware. But we've decided to take our properties or books out of Kindle Unlimited, and they're still going to be on Amazon. They're just also going to be other places. So there's no Amazon exclusivity. They'll be on iTunes, iBooks, Google Books, Barnes & Nobles, Scribd and Kobo also have Kindle Unlimited like subscription programs, and so they'll be there as well for a lot of us. But it's basically an attempt to not have all our eggs in one basket, and so the readers all over the place will have a chance to look at them and read them. So they're going to be in other places as well. This week, as part of that program, I have been highlighting some of the authors who have all agreed to like kind of promote each other and promote this decision for each other. And here are the authors that have kind of collectively decided to aid each other and talk about each other's works and promote each other's, and also go wide all at the same time. So we all kind of get that cross promotional benefit. That includes myself, Ramon Mejia, for Adventures in Terra Project Alpha, RJ Castellan, for his Fiorin series, Don Chapman, her Desert Runner series. She also has a ton of other stuff. Michael Chatfield's Amarillo series, but also all of his other things as well. G.R. Cooper, you might know him for the Shepherd's Moon, the Omegaverse series. Katie Hanna's Initializing. Actually, it's there's another name to it. It's and it slips my mind, unfortunately. But Bubbling at the Shine, of course. Lars Miller's The Wayward Bard, WD Nick's Avatar's online launch. So all these authors have decided to kind of help each other out, and all go wide at the same time. I have links in the show notes for their universal links, which means one link, and you can kind of choose where you want to kind of pick it up or look at it, and it will have all the specific links to those particular places. So it's a nice little way to have multiple sites kind of congregate in the same place for readers, at least. And of course, there are some other authors who also were affected by this, but didn't not know about this. Stephen Morse from Continue Online, his entire series has gone wide for similar reasons, as has Prax Venter for the Enthralled series. And of course, there are many other authors who have been affected by this issue, where their accounts were temporarily or permanently banned. Who are going through this currently, other authors who I don't feel comfortable naming because they haven't told me explicitly that it was okay. But there are lots of authors who this is affecting. So if you can, go support these authors by picking up their books in these places. And I know it kind of sucks for readers who have limited funds, who depend on Kindle Unlimited as their source of reading material, because it is kind of unlimited. But again, it's for a lot of these authors, the choice has come down to, if we're on Kindle Unlimited, we potentially have our accounts suspended or terminated, even though we haven't done anything wrong, because other bad actors in other places have potentially just like read our books to hide their account, hide their misuse, hide their bad acts basically, or just because Amazon's algorithms are, mistaking voracious reader habits for illegitimate and suspicious page reads. And rather than have our accounts closed, which means nobody can read our stuff at all, and we can't pay our bills. And then and for some authors, it has included ACX as well. So which means their audiobooks have also been taken down. Rather than take that risk, we just decided to leave the Kindle Unlimited program and try to do our best to make our novels lower price points for the initial ones, or run specials and things like that, and just have them other places if possible. So there it is. It's kind of a sucky situation for everybody, readers and authors included, but it is the thing that this group of authors has decided to do kind of collectively to ensure that our works are available for readers to read, instead of them just being in one place and that place just suddenly deciding to take them down. So there it is, folks. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, you can always make sure you share the links to this notes, and to help spread these links everywhere. That's really helpful for everybody as well. So if you have any questions, you can always contact us at feedback@geekbytespodcast.com or LitRPG Podcast at gmail.com. All places. Happy to answer your questions, or on Facebook and Twitter, wherever else. So there you go, folks. That's LitRPG news. A few titles that are out now that have just come out or just haven't had a chance to read, including John Wally's book 1 in the Jaro trilogy. I did ask the author whether this was LitRPG because the novel description is not 100% clear whether it is or not. He did say that there's a game in the story, there's a real life story as well, but that in the game the main character does increase specific skills. There are no levels apparently because it's a beta game. It's in beta, I should say. The game and the story is in beta. But I'm curious to see how this author has done it, because John Wally is also a moderator for some of the LitRPG Facebook groups, so other people in the community are probably familiar with him as well. So we're looking forward to reading this this weekend. Also out now is The Final Quest. Blood Feast book number 3 is out right now. So if you've been a fan of that series, if you've, I'm personally really enjoyed book 1 in the series. Book 2, not quite as much. And I'll have to see how book 3 goes. But it is out right now. Also out is Blood Mage Dragon Tamer by Deck Davis. He does a lot of first books and you never see seconds. But this is another first, so here it is. Also out now is Ascend Worlds of Game. This is it's the first book in the Chaos Emperor series. This is a kind of a side title in the author's World of Game universe. So new main character, same game world though. So if you like that world, if you like the World of Game, you might enjoy this one, I guess. I don't know, I haven't read it yet, but it is out. Okay. These last 2 were titles that came out earlier this year. I just didn't realize they existed because Amazon's search results never brought them up. It's March of the Gnomes, Arc on book number 1 as a LitRPG title. And this one is the second book in the series that also came out actually this month, I believe. Fight of the Gnomes, Arc on book number 2. They are both LitRPG. I started reading book number 1 and it does have RPG mechanics. It's just for some reason Amazon's algorithms never brought it up. And I kind of just ran into my accident as you might be interested in this title result in looking at something else. I looked and said, oh, LitRPG. I'm like, hey, I've never seen that before. And I think the reason why is because the LitRPG portion of this is actually attached to a parenthesis, which means that it says in the actual title, parenthesis, LitRPG, and there's no space in between, which means potentially Amazon's search results just aren't capturing the word LitRPG as a singular word in this title. So could be the case. Otherwise, it's just kind of weird. And I get it. Amazon's search engine doesn't always help us find the most recently released LitRPG titles, and some of they just get kind of lost in the ether. So if you're an author and you found that to be the case, let me know. I'll definitely take a look at your stuff. But those two are also out now. So there we go. In new LitRPG audiobooks, we have a couple titles as well. Travail Online Resurrection, book number 2 in that series, is out as an audiobook. Again, Chaos Seeds, book number 7. Predators is out as an audiobook. Space Knights, book number 2 is also out as an audiobook title, as is Eden's Gate, the Arena, book number 4 in that series. I just reviewed this not that long ago, actually. It came out before. Like I kind of put it on the back burner because of other things I had to read. And this was definitely a good story, good concepts, good stuff. So it's nice that it's out as an audiobook for folks who enjoy to intake their LitRPG in that format, but it is out currently as well as an audiobook. Okay, in upcoming LitRPG, we have a couple new titles. But again, this is just me reading off stuff that's going to be coming out in the future with some dates and things. So feel free to skip it if you want, but there are some new additions to this list. Accidental Raiders, book number 2 in the LitRPG Swashbuckler trilogy, and the Accidental Champion is going to be out on June the 29th, which is when most people listening to this podcast, but it'll be out in the future, obviously. On July the 1st, we have Apocalyptic book number 2, Valley of Death. This one is new and super excited about it. Michael Chatfield has a new LitRPG title. It's called The 2-Week Curse, a 10 Realms tale. It'll be out on July the 4th, according to the author. So he doesn't have a pre-order rep or anything. He does have cover art, which is showing on the video version of the podcast. But I'm super duper excited to read another Michael Chatfield book. I talked about him earlier in the other new section. He's one of the authors who's chosen to put his stuff on to go wide and to take out the Kindle Limited program, unfortunately. But this is a new title in this series. He's written, everything I've read from him has always been amazing and great. So I'm looking forward to catching this when it comes out on July the 4th. Restart Level Up book number 1. It should be out on July the 10th, which isn't that far from away. It's right at the end of June here. I really did enjoy the short story of this one in the Magic Dome Books short story collection. So I'm looking forward to reading this when I have a chance. Also out on July 23rd, it'll be the book 2 in Reality Benders, called External Threat, and book 3 in the Project Chrysalis series called Sleeping Player will be out on July 31st. That's right, we're reviewing book number 2 on this podcast today. And book 3 is already up for pre-order and set to release on July the 31st. So this series, which is originally in Russian and being translated by Litworld, has had a really quick turnaround. Like, it's been first book 1 last month, book 2 this month, book 3 next month. So good on them for releasing these on a very quick schedule. And August the 7th, Death March, Euphoria Online book number 1. August the 30th, Raven Beck's The Binding book number 2. And that's it, folks. All the stuff that's coming out that I know about. And again, authors, if you have something that you have planned release for and it's a LitRPG title, feel free to send us the information about it at feedback@geekmatspodcast.com or LitRPGpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll definitely look into getting added to this particular list, because we always love knowing about new stuff that's coming out, as do readers, so they can kind of plan their purchase schedule if they need to. So there you go. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with Stormbane, a soft LitRPG adventure. And again, this is more of just like an FYI for you. It's 124 pages, $2.99, and it's not available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not going to read you the novel description because, again, this is just kind of an FYI kind of thing. I purchased this story. It is not in Kindle Unlimited, only to realize as I was going through it that I've already read it. I have. It was originally published July 2016. This is actually a relaunch of the same story with the different cover. I'll show you the original cover for you folks at home. You might have actually seen it as this version of Stormbane, which is a completely different cover, which is why I was like, it really does look different. Like, the new version is a little more pixelated. It looks like a game character. The original version of it had like this more photorealistic forest, some lightning, and just the word Stormbane. It is the same author, and I just didn't realize it. And when I looked back, I thought I had missed something where it's like, oh, this is a new release, or this is the second edition of it or something. And there was nothing on that originally, which is why I originally put in just to let you know, oh, if you see this title, it's this earlier version of it. It's the same story. And it's more along the lines like the author hadn't mentioned it originally that it was a second edition or that it was a republish rather, because all my original links to the first version of the story are gone, like they don't work. So the author really did pull down the original story, and he put up this other version of it, or this he relaunched it with a new cover, new product page on Amazon, new IS number, whatever it is, the number that's associated with like the title of the novel as a unique product. So all that was unique again. And from the material in the back of this new version of the novel, it also seems like it's part of a relaunch to promote or market a video game that the author links to. And it turns out the author wrote for the video game. It's stuff. I know the original review was put on Amazon, and the author actually responded to me. He sent me a letter and a message on Facebook, kind of just wanting to clarify that why he decided to relaunch a story instead of just updating the original version of the novel. So he also said he would be updating the novel's description to make more clear that it is a relaunch, so that people don't feel confused or tricked if they happen to buy the first version of it and didn't realize that the second version of this was the same story. These are his words. Also, here's my reasoning behind the relaunch rather than simply updating the original version. It's all down to Amazon algorithms. The original Stormbane sold very few copies, mostly due to my complete inability to do marketing at the time, but also partly due to being the very early days of LitRPG back then. You were one of the select few, Ramon. And I also didn't think there'd be any crossover, so it didn't make a big deal about it being a relaunch. My mistake. The problem is that Amazon's algorithms are both wonderful and brutal. If sales are good, Amazon automatically promotes your book harder. If sales are bad, Amazon actually pushes your book in the background in favor of better sales. Once you're in that terrible position, there's honestly no comeback. It's like an obscurity curse. The only way to get around that is to relaunch your book with a new ASIN number, which is the information number associated with your particular book. It's like a little license number that follows your book around. And those are his comments. So there you go. Let's see. There you go. They also mentioned that he did do some revisions to the novel to keep it in line with the game he's promoting. In the back material. Like I said, it was an enjoyable novel for me the first time I read it. So this isn't a bad review or even a bad mention. It was more along like, just as an FYI, folks, if you see this thing in your Amazon search results, it's not really a new book. It's the other one. It's with the new title, with the new book read page. So just be aware of it. And again, the author has updated the novel description to be more clear and more transparent that this is a more along the lines of a second edition of that original story, which was enjoyable for me. So there you go. Okay, on to our actual reviews. We have Glitch, Book 1 in the Glitch series. It's written by Victor Deckard. Okay, it is 109 pages, $1.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description of the title. Max, a rather plain guy, finds himself inside a post-apocalyptic survival role-playing video game. He has no idea how he has ended up in the virtual reality or how to quit it. He has no choice but to play the game. Shortly afterward, he learns that the game is quite harsh and cruel. Max finds out that in order to survive, he has to scavenge, gather various resources, craft warm clothes and armor, upgrade weapons and vehicles, and so on. Moreover, the entire game world is full-on PvP zone. So Max has to not only fight brutal mutants, but also protect himself against gamers who have teamed up in order to ratchet up their chances of survival, as well as against high-leveled players who take great pleasure in murdering newbies. And, all the while, Max has been trying to find out what has befallen him, how he has gotten into the video game, and whether or not there is any chance of exiting the game. Bit by bit, he gleans more and more information about the game. He finds out that the game is full of bugs. Later on, he also learns that he himself is kind of a glitch. Unlike all the other players, he feels pain in the game and can interact with some game objects, while all the other players cannot. Now, part of this novel description doesn't actually apply to this particular story. I think the author is kind of prepping for stuff he plans to write in the future, because a lot of this glitch stuff that he mentions at the end that doesn't have anything to do with this particular edition. This novel is meant to be part of a serial story. So, but keep that in mind if you happen to pick it up. Again, it's 101 pages, $1.09. Available in Kindle Unlimited. And it just has a quick note to readers. This novel is full of technical writing errors. Like there are enough that even my brain noticed, and I normally don't even see them, to be honest. Like as I read, my brain kind of filters them out because that's just how it works. Many of the sentences, though, even the ones that are technically okay, they are worded very oddly. And they almost feel like they were translated from another language. And it's just kind of the phrasing of it. For example, just a few issues here. Examples like, I bend it over instead of I bent over. I clenched the fist instead of I clenched my fist. And those are just like a couple of examples of things that are just like phrased a little oddly, that may or may not be technically incorrect. But there are a lot of other like issues like missing words, missing wrong tenses, wrong versions of it, like, oh, this should be a plural instead of a singular sense, or just like mixed tenses in the same sentence and things like that. And it was noticeable to me. So I know a lot of people are really bothered by it. It didn't bother me personally. It's just one of those things I tend to like let readers be aware of. So if it does bother them, they're not frustrated by this book and give it a negative review based on that particular issue by itself. Okay. Overall, I'm not really sure how to describe this novel. Like, it has a couple different combinations of concepts. To me, it feels like two short stories that were kind of put together. The first half of the story is set in a setting where the main character is kind of where the story feels like it's on rails, which means like it follows a very specific path and it doesn't deviate from it. The main character, Max, wakes up and discovers very slowly, that he's trapped in a game. He follows quest after quest, learning the game mechanics until he leaves. There are no other interactions with players in the first half of the story. There are notifications about their deaths. He knows that they exist. And the game mechanics are all very thorough throughout the entire novel, and they're relatively consistent. The second half of the story-wise, is almost the exact opposite of the first. Like, the first half of the story really did feel like, oh, the system is giving him a bunch of tutorial quests and he follows them, and there is really no deviation about what happens. Death is very frequent in the story. The main character doesn't like die, and he loses all his items himself. And some experience points. But as far as like the quests and the way the story is going the first half, it's very much, it's a very linear path. In the second half of the story, it's almost, again, the opposite, in that the main character just kind of runs around in this sandbox kind of world, killing stuff, getting levels, being killed by other players, upgrading his powers a bit here and there. It really doesn't seem like any kind of focus or plot in the second half of the story, and it feels very wandery and unfocused, which is kind of the way an open world game kind of plays sometimes. If you ever play like Grand Theft Auto, or even like Fallout games, you can do a lot of different stuff. Like, you don't have to follow the main storyline, and it's very entertaining as far as the game goes, because you have a bunch of freedoms. You can do a bunch of little small quests here and there. You can just kill stuff all day long and whatever you want to. In that respect, the second half of the story does make sense. But in how it differentiates from those other concepts, that there is no option for a main story path. Like, there are really no quests in the second half of the story that give any direction or even potential direction for the story yet. So it really just feels a little more randomish, which may or may not work for you. For me, it just kind of felt a little messy in the second half of the story, again, because there really is no even potential direction. Like, there's a bunch of like concepts that are introduced, like player versus player, a bunch of like, interesting monsters and zones and potential things set up for the future. But that second half of the story is just like, here's a bunch of stuff. The author may or may not introduce them into the storylines, but these are potentialities, but that's all it kind of feels like, at least to me. Game mechanic wise, I really did enjoy the game mechanics. There's a combination of survival elements and a psychic magic system and post-apocalyptic theme. And by survival elements, I mean like, there are bars for hunger and thirst and cold, and I think radiation, some other things, where if the main character has to manage those concepts and gather resources and fill those, in addition to like regular health and like mana and stamina or whatever. So there is like a survival element that does come up again in the story. So I thought that was, again, very much in line with other novels of the same setting, or game mechanics in the same setting. So I liked seeing them here because I'm always interested in seeing new things included in our genre. The game mechanics themselves really felt well thought out. They're balanced for the most part. I personally wouldn't have chosen the class that the main character did. I probably would have chosen like the mechanic class or something. But there's definitely enough information in the story, so our game mechanics, so to like kind of build your own character, kind of see like what you would do, which is always a good sign for me. Overall, however, I think that a lot of readers are going to be heavily distracted by the technical writing issues. The story itself, again, is slice of life. It follows the main character as she just kind of does stuff without a plot, and that's very much the case, especially in the second half of the story. While personally I like the described game mechanics, everything else again felt very unfocused. I will probably personally read the next novel in the series just to see if it improves, and I generally hope it does. But this one didn't quite hit good for me, unfortunately, so it's going to get a 6 out of 10. Again, not bad, not even boring. It just didn't hit good because of, again, technical issues and, of course, kind of the unfocused nature of the story in general. Like, I don't mind slice of life. I just have some goals. Have like a place you're going with the story instead of just like filling like random stuff. Because it can just slightly unfocused. So score 6 out of 10 for me for Glitch Book 1, the Glitch series. There you go. Okay, next, it will be The Gunslinger's Code, the first exploit, a LitRPG romp through a wild, weird west that never was. That's the entire title. I know it's not on the cover art, but that's actually the title on the Amazon story. Okay, this one is 183 pages. For the author's name, Matthew Sieg. So there you go. He's also the author of the Headshot series, which is like that zombie apocalypse kind of game series. So if you like that one, this is the same author. It is 183 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Delphi isn't a gamer, and just because practically everyone else has embraced absolute reality doesn't mean she sees the appeal. But High Noon is fundamentally different from the games that have come before it. It takes place in your mind, and once she steps into that wild west that never was, a rapacious free-for-all filled to the brim with demonic packs, body modders, steampunk technicals, and gunslinging miscreants, the game's most lauded feature takes the reins. Now, none of the players know that they're playing. High Noon is as real as life, right up until it isn't. And if Delphi wants her inheritance in the real world, she has to find the township of Hope Springs and dig. Gunslinger's Code is... Oh, there's another part. So it's just like, oh, this is part of a LitRPG series. So, and the author does mention in the novel description that this is part of a serialized story. So there you go. The authors will be able to influence... The readers are able to influence the events that take place in the next book. It doesn't say how. I don't know. Maybe the author has some other thing there. Okay, but that is the novel description from the author. This is a very interesting take on LitRPG. It is heavily influenced by the television show Westworld. If you've seen that on HBO, it's like I said, just jumping into the reading of this novel. The main character, Delphi Valentine, is trying to find her inheritance in the game world that takes full immersion to the next level by making players forget that they're in the game. Instead, they have memories implanted and experience adventures as their characters. So part of the fundamental concept of this novel and this game world is that the players who are playing don't know that they're players playing a game, which again very much is in line with that influence from Westworld. As a matter of fact, I would say a good 70 to 80% of this novel really just feels like a Western story with like steampunk influences and like technomancer kind of influences. But everybody stays in character. There's very little mention of game mechanics at all. Eventually there is, but like it doesn't, even like those few mentions of game mechanics don't hit in the main storyline, I should clarify, until like 50% in the story. There are, however, chunks where the main character whenever the main character falls asleep, or when she happens to find special places, where she's aware that she's in a game, and that it's kind of this sectioned off piece of the story where the main character can see her stats. You get a character sheet and get all the great, stat information, including some original stats and everything. But it's only in these instances where RPG game mechanics actually exist for the most part. And there are like 3 or 4 places in the story where it's like 2% of the story, like so for like 5 or 6 pages each. where the main character is like looking over her stats and looking over where she is for leveling, where she is quest wise in these particular story arcs and achievements and whatever. And she's like making decisions, talking with like the AI who's helping her out, make choices like what feat she wants to take, what special quirks and whatever, like her ability upgrades. And then once that dream ends, she goes right back into not remembering anything. And so even after those things occur, like there really are like these isolated pockets of RPGness in the story. And then it goes like full on like regular fantasy, Western kind of storyline. And so for some people, that's going to be an issue. I'll get into like how I feel about that personally in a second. Game mechanic wise, there are some very original concepts here, some original stats that are not just your standard strength, health, agility kind of stuff, that are really more themed towards this particular property, like grit, and I forget some of the other ones, but they were neat and they were interesting, and they gave different bonuses. There's your standard leveling where you get experience points for finishing quests and killing people, and there are some very nicely themed abilities that the main character chooses from, which I thought were kind of neat. Again, unfortunately, you seeing these game mechanics is relatively rare in the story. Like it is very much like I would say every 20-25% on the story, you get a chance to like where the main character falls asleep and you see these things. So there we go. Let's see, how about halfway through the story though, again, in the main storyline where the character's herself doing adventures and she just doesn't remember everything, there is kind of a middle ground that introduces some game mechanics. Another one of the players, who again doesn't know he's a player, he pops up and he has the sight, and he's able to see percentages about weapons and what upgrades it has and what added damages there are, and that's about as close as you get to like game mechanics in the main part of the storyline. The main character herself doesn't have this sight yet. It is like clarified in the story that she missed her opportunity to get the sight because of some other things that happened in the story, which I don't want to spoil for you guys. But it is also hinted at that maybe there's a way for her to get the sight and see these kind of game mechanic elements in the story in the future, but it doesn't happen here. So in this particular story, the game mechanics are relatively light to the actual story. Again, there are just pockets of like RPGness in like every 25-ish% in the novel. Story-wise, it's a very slice of life story. There are long-term goals for the main character. Like I said, it's introduced in the novel description. She's very much focused on getting her inheritance and getting to this particular town. Even though in-game, she doesn't remember why, she does have that urge to go there. It's only in those like dream sequences that she like remembers and does it, but even like she's not remembering any of that stuff. So it's a very, like I said, very Westworld inspired, in that there are these sections of like almost super immersive, super role playing sections, and then like these little cutaways, or like everybody sees behind the screen, behind the mask of the system, and the RPG mechanics and the other parts are revealed. Like I said, it's very Westworldy. So if you like that show, this might be something that you're really into. So the very small adventure the main character goes on, though, are very interesting. They, again, feel like a series of short stories that are kind of connected. Like her adventures, her quests are very encapsulated. And so they are interesting. The writing itself is fun. The writing itself is entertaining. There was a lot of introspective talk from the main character, like the main character talking to herself. And this is, again, part of the author's writing style thing, because this also happened in book one, in all the books of the Headshot series, where the main character was just like self-exposition, where they're talking to themselves a lot and thinking about things. And that's still occurs here. And so if that's not the kind of writing you like, just an FYI. But for me, the stories themselves were fun and interesting. And I saw a lot of like interesting story potential here. There is kind of, again, a to be continued nature to the ending of the story. It's just kind of like, oh, great fight, and then bam, ends. And it was a little frustrating for me because there's no like big resolution to a lot of plot points here. And again, but that's also part of the style of the series, in that this is meant to be like episode 1 in a serial story. And so just be aware of that going into this, that's the case here. Like I'm hoping episode 2, that's not officially called episode 2, but that's how I'm thinking in my head, because it is, again, very much modeled after a television show kind of concept. Overall, I think the story has barely enough to be considered LitRPG, and that's mostly because the game mechanics in the main storyline are hidden away. Like I would say like 90% of the time in the main storyline, when the character is in game and character, none of the game mechanics really exist. Like, it really does feel like, oh, it's a Western story with like steampunk influences. And again, that is right up until about the halfway mark, when you get some hints that other players and other things do see these game mechanics to a certain extent. But for me, it was just like, oh, is this LitRPG? Because a lot of these game mechanics feel like they're hidden away in the main storyline. And I think it's just because of that particular aspect where like the author may be introducing them later on. I don't want to necessarily, write this off as not being LitRPG, because the author did take the time to write these little sections of it, but they are isolated from the main storyline. So it's kind of this weird mix. And again, all this is very much in theme with the Westworld influence. So it absolutely makes sense as far as that goes. But for me, I'm like, okay, for me, just enough. And I'm hoping that there's more RPG mechanics in the main storyline in the next episode of the book, I guess. But again, the RPG aspects did feel very isolated, and there really was no clear impact of them on the story for the most part. Again, I'm hoping it changes in the future, and there are hints that it will be, but for now, it just wasn't a particularly satisfying read for me. So for me, it gets score 6 out of 10. That's the Gunslinger's Code, the first exploit, a LitRPG romp through the wild, weird West that never was. With the score 6 out of 10, it just, because of the issues with the RPG mechanics not really existing in the main storyline, and kind of in the end of the story, it's like, wait, that's it. It just didn't hit good for me. And I'm genuinely hoping that book 2 or whatever else in the series does make adjustments and kind of expands the sight for the main character, because that seems like a really simple fix to this, and that the main character gets a sight and then she starts seeing these game mechanics, even if it's like slowly revealed, whatever the case is. And I would have a much better time with the story, because then it would feel a little more gamey. But again, that's the author's choice. I'm not criticizing that choice at all. That's just how I happen to feel about the story and why I feel that way. So there you go. Okay, next we have The End of an Era, Project Chrysalis, book number 2, last one in the review. This one is 176 pages, $5.99, not available on Kindle Unlimited. This is kind of expensive. Here, I'll read you the author's description. Test your might. This world is bigger than you could ever imagine. Chrysalis is full of danger, giant raid bosses, guilds of skillful fighters and gods, whose power is both enormous and infinite. Too bad Anji has unwillingly crossed the path of so many of them. His simple wish to be happy with at least virtual parents has turned into a disaster. To delete the character and start over again was the simplest way out. But not for Anji. He has already faced death itself, walked over fire fields of hell, and his crusade is far from over. In order to face this world with his head held high, Anji will do his best to become stronger, no matter what it takes, no matter how much of the forbidden magic he will have to use, even if it means becoming a monster people fear more than death. Still, Anji's social skills, psychological, and emotional conditions continue to worry adults. Betrayed and wounded so deeply by people he thought he could trust, will he ever be able to communicate properly, to find his own place in the world, to find anyone to trust, a friend, or a comrade in arms? And what if that friend is not quite human? Life changes for those who are determined and ready to act, and Anji is not the only one willing to fight for his selfish goals. The world of Chrysalis is at the edge of a new era. The hordes of undead led by ancient gods prove again and again how easy it is to tear apart young guilds. This is not a war fought by humans, as they might have led you to believe. It is a sphere for the gods to fight. So that is a long novel description. It is reveal a lot of the main themes of the story, though. This is definitely an expensive read. For the page count, it's almost 40 cents per page, which is well above what I would normally pay. I normally try to stick to about a penny a page, basically. And this one is, I'm sorry, this is like 4 cents per page. And I just try to stick about one penny a page. But if you liked book 1 in this series, this is a good read. It really is. I wouldn't start in book 2 at all. I would, if you're interested in this, go get a sample, because book 1 is also not on Kindle Unlimited. Read a sample. You might like, you might not. Magic Jump Books also, I believe, has like the first few chapters, or sorry, Lit World, I think actually has the first 2 chapters of this on their site, so you can also check it out there. But it is, to me, a worthwhile read in just about every way. This is a more refined version of book 1. It leaves behind much of the World War drama and focuses on mostly on the in-game storyline, which is definitely an improvement for me, because the Real World one, while it was interesting, it definitely had issues though, and it kind of distracted from like the really good in-game storyline. The story itself is very slice of life still. The main character has some very clear goals that he's looking to accomplish, and the story overall feels very much more focused. In addition to the interesting combat situations, the main character uses his powers he established in book 1. There were some genuinely good story arcs here that have like actual resolutions, including the search for his parents. He goes on a test for Elite Hunter organization, and some gods looking to put the hurt on the main character. And those were all very interesting story arcs, but they're also very, they're very much resolvable, I guess I should say. Like you see beginning, middles, and ends of them in each one of those cases. And so they feel very satisfying, sort of like accomplished adventures. Overall, this is, like I said, I had a good time reading the story. It went by surprisingly quickly, which is always a good sign for me in reading a story. I will definitely pick up book 3 when it comes out, which is actually just next month. So for me, it gets a score 7.4 out of 10. I had a good time with it. It was really enjoyable. I actually liked it better than book 1 in the series. But again, if you've never read any of these, you have to start at book 1. It's not one of those series where you can just kind of jump into book 2 and be like, oh, this makes total sense. That is not going to occur here. You're going to be super confused if you try to get into book 1. But like I said, it's also not in Kindle Unlimited, and it is on the expensive side for the page count. So definitely go read a sample of this. I think it might also be other places. So go to, might find part of it on Royal Road as well. But that's a score of 7.4 out of 10 for End of an Era, Project Chrysalis, book number 2. And that's it, folks. Short episode. Not a lot of stuff that I had a chance to review or read this week. Not a lot of releases in general this week, which is fine. Hopefully next week will be a little bit more stuff. But it's still very enjoyable. Had a good time with it. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, for taking the time to hear me talk about some issues in the community of authors and LitRPG community in general. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, Patreon, on our webpage, plenty of other places and on the internet where you can find cool LitRPG titles. We'll have a link in the show notes for all those places. If you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways you do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But one of the biggest ways you can help us out this week, just share the episode of the podcast. We have a link on Facebook and Twitter where we have articles for those authors who are having issues and chosen to go ride. Just go share those pages. Go share those Twitters, tweets. Is that what it? Yeah, tweets. Or Facebook page things, and share them and just spread the word that this is an actual issue for the people and the authors that you happen to love, and it's affecting them, and it's affecting your ability as readers to get the content that you want in the programs that you want. Go to Amazon, go share it so that everybody's aware of it, and you'll also be helping to support the authors in spreading the good books that you happen to love about them. So that's the way we'll ask you to help us out this week. And that's it. Thanks for hanging out with us, ladies and gentlemen. Until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.